Welcome to the Deep Dive. If you follow the really complex world of global intelligence, today we're pulling back the curtain. We're looking at a really intense period for the Mossad. This was during a critical time, in the conflict over Iran's nuclear program. So get ready. We're going to cut through some complexity and find some, frankly, surprising insights. We've got a fantastic stack of sources for this deep dive. We're talking articles, official reports, some incredible insider accounts, too. They really paint a picture of the covert ops, the delicate diplomatic back channels, and those intense internal political fights happening inside Israel during these key years.
Yeah, our mission today is really to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, the key insights from all this complex material. We want to help you understand the main players, what drove them, their motivations, and, well, the often surprising twists and turns from around 2011 right up to the Iran nuclear deal in 2015. It's a period that really throws into sharp relief that constant tension, between the overt political stuff and the hidden shadow world of intelligence. It's just a critical way to see how these high-stakes events actually play out. It shows us that what we see publicly on the political stage, that's often just the tip of the iceberg. So much is driven by covert strategies, internal power struggles, things that shape events in ways the public, well, they rarely get to see.
Okay, so to set the scene, let's go back to January 2011. This is Amir Dagan's last day as Mossad head. 9 years he was there. And he does something really extraordinary, completely unprecedented. He invites journalists to Mossad headquarters. Now, they probably thought they were getting a summary of his career, maybe his analysis of Iran, but instead, they get this scathing public criticism from an official still in office, mind you, aimed right at Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Barak.
Yeah.
Specifically, their desire for a military strike on Iran.
And a lot of that was initially censored, right, by the chief military censor.
Exactly. Sima Vakengil. She censored quite a bit of it initially. But Dagan, well, he wasn't finished. Just a few months later, June 2011, he says it all again, publicly at Tel Aviv University, now to a much wider audience.
And how could they prosecute him? I mean, a national hero like Dagan.
Right. For speaking his mind. And what's really striking, he didn't just stick to Iran. He also called for Israel to accept the Saudi peace initiative, make progress on the Palestinian front. He really broadened his critique way beyond just the nuclear issue.
That is quite something, isn't it? Dagan using his exit to make such a big public statement and then doubling down, it really signals, a deep conviction, maybe even alarm about where policy was headed. It just underscores how serious the disagreements were at the very top of the security establishment back then.
Absolutely, a clear sign of deep fissures. And the very next day, after Dagan's first chat with those journalists, his successor takes over, Tamir Pardo. Pardo had actually come out of retirement for this job. He'd been Dagan's deputy twice before. Now, to really get the complexities Pardo was facing, you kind of need to understand his background, his personal history. It's pretty remarkable. Son of Holocaust survivors. Served in Sayeret Matkal, that's Israel's elite special forces unit. He was part of the famous 1976 Operation Thunderbolt, the Entebbe rescue.
Ah, right, Entebbe.
And crucially, he was right there, next to Yonah and Netanyahu, the prime minister's older brother, the only Israeli commando killed in that operation. After that, he joins the Mossad, starts in research, moves up, heads Kishet, the eavesdropping unit, then head of special operations. Became Dagan's deputy back in 2002.
Didn't he leave for a bit, though?
He did, briefly. In 2006, he left to advise the IDF's Special Operations Division. Got involved in planning against Hezbollah, which he famously called an Iranian invention, basically giving Tehran a border with Israel. Came back to Mossad in 2007. Now, his appointment as chief in 2010, that came after Netanyahu had actually extended Dagan's term first.
Why is the delay?
Well, partly because Ehud Barak apparently opposed Pardo getting the job. This is despite Pardo staying close to the Netanyahu family. He even named his son Yonatan.
Interesting. And there was a catch to his appointment, too, wasn't there? Something about his deputy?
Yes, exactly. That's where it gets pretty revealing. Netanyahu demanded that Pardo appoint Yossi Cohen as his deputy.
Wow, demanded.
Yeah, Pardo refused. He argued, look, Ram Ben Barak, my current deputy, he's excellent. Can't just remove him without a professional reason.
So what happened?
Well, they reached sort of an informal compromise. Ben Barak would stay on for about a year, and then Cohen would take over.
That kind of political maneuvering right at the top of intelligence. It's fascinating.
It certainly is. Pretty strong-arm move from Netanyahu, demanding a specific deputy like that. I mean, how common is that for a PM to dictate appointments that deep inside Mossad?
Well, it's not totally unheard of for a prime minister to have, a preference. But to demand a specific deputy, especially over someone already there and highly qualified, that's definitely unusual. It really speaks to Netanyahu's desire for, let's say, specific loyalty right at the top of the security apparatus.
And the potential implications.
Oh, it can definitely complicate things internally. It could lead to perceptions of politicization, which in an intelligence agency, well, that can be really damaging. Bad for morale, bad for operational focus.
Yeah, I can see that. Okay, so Pardo's now in charge at Mossad. The immediate question is, what does he do about Iran? Unsurprisingly, the covert campaign against Iran's nuclear scientists, which, remember, Pardo himself had devised it, only accelerated. We saw several major assassinations happen pretty quickly under his watch.
Yeah.
July 2011, Dariush Razainajad, nuclear physicist, expert in high-voltage switches, killed. 2 gunmen on a motorcycle.
Yeah.
Shot him 5 times. Mossad naturally didn't claim it, but Western intelligence sources pointed the finger straight at them. Then, January 2012, Mustafa Ahmadi Roshan, nuclear chemistry expert, killed by a magnetic bomb stuck to his car. Assailants on a motorcycle again.
The same method as a previous killing, right, in 2010.
Exactly the same tactic.
Yeah.
And this time, Iran openly acknowledged it and blamed Israel directly.
And this campaign, it wasn't just focused on individual scientists, was it? There was that big explosion, too.
Right, connecting it to the bigger picture. That mysterious explosion in November 2011 at the Al Ghadir missile base at Bid-Kaneh.
Yeah, that blast was huge, shook windows miles away in Tehran, killed 17 Revolutionary Guards, including Major General Hassan Tarani Moghadam. He was basically the architect of Iran's entire ballistic missile program.
So what was the official story?
The IRGC claimed it was an accident, transferring munitions. But Israeli sources, talking to foreign media, claimed it was joint Mossad and MEK, that's the People's Mujahedin Organization of Iran, an anti-regime group.
And Israel's official line?
Declined to comment officially, but Defense Minister Ehud Barak quipped, "May there be more like it."
Subtle.
And former Mossad deputy Ilan Mizrahi added, "God bless those who are behind it." Pretty telling non-denials, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. So Moghadam was a huge target then.
Oh, definitely. His background explains why. Fought in the Iran-Iraq War, set up the IRGC's artillery corps, reverse-engineered missiles deep into ballistic missile development. He even supplied tech to Palestinian groups and Hezbollah. His gravestone says it all, really. Here lies a man who wanted to destroy Israel.
Wow.
Interestingly, his brother actually claimed Mossad involvement later on, but then he was forced to retract it. It just shows how incredibly sensitive these things were.
It really does highlight this murky world of intelligence, how hard it is to pin anything down, for sure. Like, remember that Rusair plane crash in June 2011? 5 Russian nuclear experts died.
I recall that. Speculation flew around naturally.
Of course. Mossad involvement. But Pardo flatly denied it. Said Mossad it would never do something like that, especially given the price Israel would pay for hitting a Russian target, inside Russia no less.
And that policy of silence from Mossad is key here, isn't it? That adds to the murkiness.
Definitely. Pardo himself said something really revealing after he retired. He said, the Mossad isn't an organization for targeted killing. Sometimes you have to do that, but you don't have to admit it.
Right. And didn't he add something about the scale?
He did. This is the kicker. What people claim the Mossad has done in that period isn't even 1,000th of what we did.
Wow, just 1,000th. That quote is something else. It gives you this almost unsettling glimpse into the real scale of these operations. It makes you realize how little of the real story probably ever comes out. It kind of fundamentally challenges how we understand these international events.
Puts the whole idea of shadow wars into stark perspective, yeah. So with this ramped-up covert campaign hitting Iran hard, it's, well, no surprise they started looking for ways to hit back, planning retaliation.
Right. The pressure on their nuclear program was intense.
Yeah.
Calls for revenge must have been growing inside Iran.
And we saw several attempts, mostly failed by Iran and Hezbollah in 2011-2012, trying to hit Israeli diplomats around the world. January 2012, a cell planning to kill the Israeli ambassador in Azerbaijan, exposed. February 2012, an Israeli diplomat's wife in New Delhi was wounded by a magnetic bomb on her car.
The exact same method used against the Iranian scientists.
Exactly. Same day, a bomb found under an Israeli staffer's car in Tbilisi, Georgia. Diffused just in time. The very next day, a bomb goes off too early in Bangkok. 3 Iranians convicted, later released in a prisoner swap, interestingly.
Yeah.
And then June 2012, 2 Iranians arrested in Mombasa, Kenya. They had military-grade explosives, planning attacks on Israeli and Western targets.
So mostly thwarted attempts then.
Mostly. But here's where the story shifts a bit. despite those failures, a successful attack did happen.
Yeah.
July 2012. A Hezbollah suicide bombing in Burgas, Bulgaria. Killed 5 Israeli tourists and their Bulgarian driver.
And Israel's reaction.
Immediate blame placed squarely on Iran.
So that pattern,
Yeah.
the magnetic bombs, Iran's acknowledgments, then the direct attack on civilians in Burgas, it really shows a quick escalation in this shadow war, doesn't it? Moving from targeting Iranian assets to hitting Israeli citizens abroad.
Definitely an escalation. And all this is happening while that intense internal debate is raging back in Israel. Should we launch a military strike or not?
Yeah.
And that debate just got hotter as Iran's program got closer to what they call the zone of immunity.
Referring to the Fordow facility, right. Buried deep under a mountain. Much harder to hit.
Exactly. So October 2011, Netanyahu and Barak are pushing again hard for an IDF attack on Iran. But here's the thing. Tamir Pardo, just like Dagan before him, was firmly against a military strike.
Why? What were his concerns?
He was apparently deeply worried that Netanyahu was taking steps tantamount to launching a war without getting the approval of the cabinet, which Israeli law required.
That's serious.
So serious that Pardo apparently considered quitting if the order for a major airstrike actually came down. Eventually, Netanyahu and Barak, likely under pressure from others in the security establishment, agreed to put it to a vote in the inner cabinet. And in that meeting, Pardo, along with the IDF chief of staff Benny Gantz and the Shin Bet chief Yoram Cohen, they all spoke out against a strike.
Now, what's really interesting here, the crucial difference from the debate back in 2010. By this point, the IDF chief, Gantz, was actually confident his pilots could destroy the Iranian facilities completely.
So it wasn't about capability anymore.
No. The opposition from Pardo, Gantz, and Cohen, it was about something else. The absolute need for coordination with the United States. Barak, apparently, wanted to tell the U.S. basically after the fact. Fait accompli. Maybe just a few hours warning.
And the vote.
Went against Netanyahu and Barak, no IDF attack.
So what was the fallout from that? Such a major disagreement at the top.
Well, this is where it gets even more intense. There were reports, strong suggestions that Netanyahu asked the Shin Bet chief, Yoram Cohen, to wiretap Pardo and Gantz's phones.
Or tap his own Mossad chief and IDF chief.
Supposedly to stop leaks about the Iran situation. Now, Netanyahu and Yoram Cohen have both denied this ever happened. But Pardo himself was clearly left with the impression that some kind of investigation did take place.
That's just astonishing. The prime minister ordering surveillance on his top security chiefs? Whether it happened or not, the fact it was even credibly reported.
It speaks volumes about the level of distrust, doesn't it?
How deeply did that kind of infighting affect things? Morale, functioning, during such a critical time.
You have to imagine the impact was significant. When the political leadership is that much at odds with its intelligence and military heads, and you have accusations of wiretapping flying around, it creates a really toxic atmosphere. It undermines trust, could lead to self-censorship. It might even mess with strategic decision-making. You've got an internal battle alongside the external threat.
Part of considering resignation really underscores how bad it must have been.
Exactly.
Okay, so a big military strike is mostly off the table. The focus starts shifting towards diplomacy. Though, let's be clear, the covert stuff didn't stop.
Not at all. Kept going in the background. But Iran at this point was under massive economic pressure from sanctions, crippling pressure. They were having real trouble shipping oil, basically locked out of global banking. That made them much more open to talking, to finding some kind of deal.
And that created an opening, right? Oman stepped in.
Yes, Oman played a crucial role, offered to mediate secret talks between Iran and the U.S. Those started around July 2012.
And Israel knew about these.
They did, through their own sources, yes. But real progress started after Hassan Rouhani, seen as a moderate, was elected president of Iran in June 2013.
So that combination, diplomatic opportunity, internal political shifts in Iran, started changing the whole dynamic.
Absolutely. And with Rouhani in charge, those secret talks finally came out into the open. That paved the way for an interim nuclear deal in August 2013 with the P5+1.
That's the 5 permanent UN Security Council members, plus Germany.
Right. And then eventually, the final deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA, signed in July 2015.
What was Mossad doing during all these negotiations?
Well, reports suggest Israel was spying pretty heavily on the Vienna talks for about 18 months, possibly using the Dukworm, a variant of Stuxnet. They were even apparently passing information to U.S. lawmakers, trying to turn them against the deal.
Trying to sabotage it from the inside.
Seems like it. And crucially, Pardo later confirmed that Mossad operations against Iran kept going throughout that whole interim period. between the interim deal and the final JCPOA. Even though no big kinetic actions were reported publicly, Pardo suggested Israel just kept them quiet, and Iran, wanting the talks to succeed, also downplayed them.
So, like an unspoken agreement, the shadow war continues, just don't derail the diplomacy.
It certainly looks that way. Once the JCPOA was signed, Mossad's main focus shifted more towards intelligence gathering, verifying if Iran was actually complying.
And the key terms of the JCPOA, remind us quickly.
Iran had to give away a lot of enriched uranium, enough for about 10 bombs worth, reduce its stockpile to 300 kilograms, enriched only to 3.67%, and put about 75% of its centrifuges into storage.
Okay. But despite that deal being reached, Israel had major objections, didn't it?
Oh, strong objections. The main one was the sunset clause, the deal expiring in 2030, after which Iran could theoretically ramp up fuel production without limits. Plus, the deal didn't address Iran's ballistic missile program at all, or its support for groups Israel considered terrorists.
Well, and this led to that very public split in views between Netanyahu and Pardo. Netanyahu famously went all out to try and kill the JCPOA. Remember his speech to the U.S. Congress in March 2015?
How could anyone forget?
Calling it a very bad deal, saying it wouldn't stop Iran getting the bomb. A speech many Democrats saw as just outrageous, a violation of protocol, really damaging U.S.-Israel relations.
Pardo, though, had a much more, let's say, nuanced perspective. He admitted the deal had flaws, definitely, but he was strongly against Netanyahu's apocalyptic rhetoric. He thought Israel should work with the U.S. to fix the problems, not just try to blow the whole thing up.
And his assessment of the actual threat from Iran, that was quite different, too.
Radically different, publicly anyway. Pardo said, does Iran pose a threat to Israel? Absolutely. But if one said a nuclear bomb in Iranian hands was an existential threat, that would mean that we would have to close up shop and go home. That's not the situation. He literally said the term existential threat is used too freely, called it a significant exaggeration.
Wow. Coming from a former Mossad chief, that's a powerful statement, especially compared to his prime minister's language.
It's profoundly important. It de-escalates the whole thing, moves it from this absolute end-of-days scenario to, well, a serious strategic challenge, but one that could potentially be managed.
It suggests a different understanding within the intelligence community, maybe more pragmatic.
It certainly seems that way, a more strategic, maybe less emotional assessment of the real situation. Pardo also famously said more sanctions during the negotiations is like throwing a grenade into the room, highlighting just how delicate that diplomacy was.
It's quite something. At the same time, Netanyahu's trying to kill the deal, Iran's supreme leader, Khamenei, he seemed almost reluctant, but went along with it.
Yeah, it's paradoxical. Khamenei had this long history of believing Iranian opposition groups were all linked to the U.S., the CIA, Mossad, the great Satan of America. But apparently, during those intense talks between 2013 and 2015, he came to believe Mossad operations would actually slow down because of the negotiations. And that was reportedly one reason he allowed the talks to move forward, despite his own deep reservations.
That's fascinating, almost ironic. The covert pressure might have, in a way, pushed Iran towards the table.
It really highlights the complex game of power and perception, doesn't it? And this period, it also set off wider shifts in the region's geopolitics. Those interim accords really spooked the Gulf states, made them much more open to talking to Israel because they shared that growing concern about Iran's influence.
And Pardo jumped on that opportunity.
He absolutely did. Secret meetings with Bandar bin Sultan, head of Saudi intelligence back then, met him in London, apparently a long and boozy dinner, and also in Geneva and Riyadh. And Bandar, it's worth noting, already had connections with previous Mossad directors.
So these weren't entirely out of the blue.
No, but the intensity and frequency seemed to increase. The Mossad kept pushing for stronger ties with the Gulf states. But the Gulf states often felt Israel was the one holding things back by not making progress on the Palestinian issue.
That's a really crucial point. A shift in alliances driven by Iran, but still hitting that familiar roadblock with the Palestinians.
Exactly. And Pardo shared this really poignant quote from a Muslim head of state he spoke with about the different dreams in the region. He recounted the leader saying something like, "We Muslims have a dream that one day we wake up and there won't be a single Jew between the Mediterranean and the Jordan Valley."
Wow.
Pardo said he was shocked, but the leader continued, "You Jews have the same dream, but vice versa. We woke up and understood that it was just a dream and will remain just a dream. You Jews still believe that it can happen.
That's incredibly powerful. What a quote.
It really encapsulates that deep, almost psychological barrier that still exists, doesn't it? Even when pragmatic reasons for cooperation, like confronting Iran, emerge. A stark reminder of how much history still shapes everything.
What an incredible journey through this deep dive.
Yeah.
The complexity, the hidden layers, it's just immense. We've covered intense internal power struggles, daring covert ops, high-stakes diplomacy, shifting alliances.
Yeah, the core takeaway, I think, is seeing how that period of really intense pressure and covert action ultimately pushed things towards a diplomatic agreement, however flawed some saw it, and how the intelligence agencies had to adapt their roles from direct action to, well, monitoring compliance, all playing out against this backdrop of deep-seated geopolitical tensions and those very different ideas about what threat even means. It just reveals how much of international relations really happens in the shadows, doesn't it? Far from what we usually see.
It absolutely does. So thinking about this murky world of intelligence and those profound historical dreams and realities we just talked about, what implications might this behind-the-scenes understanding have for how you, the listener, perceive current events in the Middle East and that delicate, constant balancing act between overt politics and covert actions in international relations? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We definitely encourage you to keep exploring